My brother handed me a manila envelope at my own going-away party and said, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, "You should open this before you sign anything at the bank tomorrow." Everyone was there. My coworkers, my two closest friends, my aunt who had driven 4 hours from Cincinnati. There were balloons. Someone had ordered a sheet cake with "Congratulations, Maeve" written in blue frosting. I was 31 years old. I had just been promoted to regional manager at my firm, and I was 3 days away from closing on my first house. It was supposed to be the best week of my life. I looked at the envelope. My name was written on the front in my brother's handwriting. Not Maeve, not Sis, just my full name. Maeve Christine Aldridge. Like a legal document. Like a warning. "What is this?" I asked. He shrugged, took a sip of his beer. "Just some information. Dad would have wanted you to have it." My father had been dead for 4 months. I didn't open it at the party. I tucked it under my arm, kept smiling, ate a piece of cake I didn't taste, and said goodbye to everyone with my chest tight and my hands cold. When the last guest left and I was alone in my apartment with the streamers still hanging from the ceiling, I sat down at my kitchen table and opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It was a printout of an email. The sender was my father. The recipient was my brother, whose name is Fletcher. The date was 11 days before my father's stroke. I read it twice, then a third time. Then I put it face down on the table because I couldn't look at it anymore. The email said that my father had been reconsidering his estate plan. It said he was thinking about restructuring the family business, Aldridge Landscaping and Property Management, which he had built over 30 years into something worth just over $2 million. It said he wanted to discuss rebalancing the inheritance, given that Fletcher had worked in the business for the past decade, and Maeve, he wrote, had chosen a different path. Chosen a different path. Like I had abandoned them. Like I had walked out. I grew up in Dayton, Ohio, in a house that always smelled like cut grass and motor oil because my father ran his landscaping crews out of the garage. He was up before dawn 6 days a week from April through November. He was the kind of man who fixed things instead of replacing them, who kept a handwritten ledger even after my brother set up QuickBooks, who gave his workers Christmas bonuses even in the lean years. I'm nephew stood in my Bailey. I'm Robert Sinclair, 67 years old, that the business was always going to be Fletcher's. Not because anyone said it out loud. They didn't have to. It was in the way my father took Fletcher out to job sites on Saturdays when I was doing homework inside. It was in the way the dinner conversation shifted to route optimization and equipment costs when Fletcher started working there full-time. I was the one who sat at the table nodding along, and my father was kind to me, genuinely kind. But the business was a language he and Fletcher spoke together that I had never been taught. So I found my own language. I studied business administration at Ohio State. I interned. I networked. I worked my way up at a commercial real estate firm in Columbus, slowly, without a safety net, without a father who could put in a word or hand me a paycheck. I was proud of that. I am still proud of that. Fletcher, meanwhile, had stayed home. He drove the trucks. He managed the crews. He handled the client relationships my father had built over decades. I respected that too. I did. The business was his in every practical sense. I had never expected otherwise. What I hadn't expected was the envelope. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed with the ceiling fan turning slowly overhead and thought about the timing. 11 days before the stroke, my father had been 64 years old, healthy, no prior cardiac history. The stroke came out of nowhere, or so we were told. He was unconscious for 3 days before he died. He never updated his will. The existing documents, drawn up 7 years ago, split the estate evenly between Fletcher and me. Fletcher knew what those documents said. He had always known, and now he was handing me an email at a going-away party 3 days before I was about to sign a mortgage, suggesting that maybe the split wasn't what Dad had really wanted. I called in sick the next day. I sat at my kitchen table with a yellow legal pad and wrote down everything I knew. My father had been sharp, organized, meticulous. If he had truly decided to restructure his estate, he would have called his attorney. He would have made an appointment. He would have done it properly. He would not have sent a single email to Fletcher and then died 11 days later without following through. Unless he never got the chance, or unless the email wasn't entirely what it appeared to be. I picked up the printout again. I looked at the formatting. I looked at the timestamp. I looked at the subject line, which read, RE, Business Succession Discussion, which meant it was a reply, which meant there had been a prior email, which meant Fletcher had initiated the conversation. My father had been responding to something Fletcher sent him first. I drove to my parents' house that afternoon. My mother still lived there. She was a quiet woman, the kind of woman who kept her feelings folded neatly inside her like sweaters in a drawer, but she had been shattered by my father's death in a way that had made her smaller somehow, like she was slowly taking up less space in the world. When I walked in, she was at the kitchen sink washing a single mug, and she looked at me with tired eyes that said she already knew why I was there. He showed you, she said. It wasn't a question. He showed me an email, I said. Mom, did Dad ever talk to you about changing the will? She turned off the faucet. She dried her hands slowly on a dish towel. He mentioned it once, she said, in passing. He said Fletcher had brought it up and he was thinking about it. Thinking about it isn't doing it. I know that. Did he call his attorney? She looked at the dish towel in her hands. Not that I know of. I sat down at the kitchen table where I'd eaten breakfast for 18 years. The table had a burn mark near one edge from a casserole dish in 1999. Some things stay the same forever. Mom, I said carefully, has Fletcher said anything to you about the estate since Dad died? She sat down across from me. She looked smaller than I remembered. He says he's handling it. He says there's a lot of complexity with the business assets. He set up a meeting with an accountant last month. I didn't go. He said I didn't need to. Something cold moved through me. He told you that you didn't need to go to your own estate meeting? He said it was just preliminary, just numbers. And you believed him. She looked at me with something between exhaustion and shame. He's been here, Maeve. He's been here every day since her father died. He fixes things around the house. He brings groceries. You're in Columbus. There it was. The sentence that had lived in our family for years like a guest nobody acknowledged. You're not here. You chose to leave. Whatever happens next, you weren't present for it. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I just took a picture of the email with my phone, hugged my mother for a long time, and drove back to Columbus. That night, I called an attorney. Not the family's estate attorney, who had known Fletcher since he was 12 years old. I found a probate and estate litigation specialist named Ms. Okafor at a firm I found through a referral from a colleague. Her office was on the 4th floor of a glass building on Broad Street. I left her a voicemail explaining the situation in broad strokes and asked if she could meet with me before Friday. She called me back at 8 the next morning. Tell me about the email, she said, before I had even finished introducing myself. I told her everything. She was quiet for a moment. Do you have access to your father's email account? I might, I said. He used the same password for everything. He was old-fashioned that way. If you can access it legally and non-invasively, she said, I'd be very interested in seeing the full thread. Both the original email and your father's response. What you were given is a reply. A reply to something. I want to see what that something was. I want to pause here and tell you about my father's email password because it matters and because it made me cry when I figured it out. His password was the same one he had used for the past 15 years, Maeve Fletcher, 1993, the year we were both alive for the first time. Me born in January, Fletcher born in October. He had put us in the same password, equal, together. That was who my father was. I logged in. The original email from Fletcher was dated 2 weeks before my father's stroke. The subject line he had initiated was, thinking about the future of the business. It was 3 paragraphs long. Fletcher had written, with careful, lawyerly language, that he had concerns about what would happen to Aldridge Landscaping if the estate were split evenly. He had written that a 50-50 split of business assets between a hands-on operator and an absent co-owner could create instability. He had included a link to an article about family business succession disputes. And then, at the end, almost as an aside, he had written, "I just think it's worth having the conversation, Dad. Maeve has her own career. She doesn't need this the way I do. She doesn't need this the way I do." My father's reply had been short. He said he appreciated Fletcher bringing it up. He said he would think about it. He said he would call his attorney after the season wound down in November. He never made it to November. I sent the full thread to Ms. Okafor. She called me back within the hour. "This is a pressure email," she said without preamble. "Your brother applied targeted pressure on a specific timeline before a health event, citing your absence as justification. Your father expressed willingness to consider it, but made no legal changes. The existing will stands. The email is not a legal document." "Then why did he give it to me?" I asked. "He gave it to you," Ms. Okafor said slowly, "to see what you would do. If you panicked and backed away from the inheritance voluntarily, he wouldn't have to fight. If you didn't, he wanted you to feel uncertain, destabilized, like the moral ground was shifting under you." I thought about the timing, the going away party, the sheet cake, the blue frosting. He had chosen the happiest moment he could find and dropped a grenade into it. "Is there anything else I should know?" she asked. I thought for a moment. "He's been managing my mother's finances since Dad died. She didn't go to the estate accountant meeting he set up." Another pause. "Does your mother have her own financial advisor or attorney?" "I don't think so." "I'd like her to have one," Ms. Okafor said. "Soon." The next few weeks were the strangest of my life. I went to work every day. I reviewed lease agreements and ran property valuations and sat in meetings where nobody knew that I was quietly unraveling. I bought my house anyway because I had worked too hard for that mortgage approval to let my brother's timing take it from me. I signed the papers on a Friday morning with my hands steady and my face calm. I took a photo of the keys in my palm and sent it to nobody. I drove to Dayton every weekend. I took my mother to brunch. I helped her go through my father's files. It was during one of these afternoons, sitting on the floor of his home office, surrounded by manila folders, that I found the ledger. My father kept a handwritten ledger for the business going back 22 years. Every job, every invoice, every payroll entry. He had 9 ledger books total lined up on the bottom shelf of his bookcase like a set of encyclopedias. I opened the most recent one. The entries for the past 2 years were in 2 different handwritings. My father's, tight and slanted, and another hand, rounder, that I recognized as Fletcher's. That was normal. Fletcher had been the day-to-day operator for years. What was not normal was a column of entries that didn't match any invoice I could find in the folder marked Accounts Receivable. Regular withdrawals. Rounded numbers. Logged under a notation that just said Ops Advance F. Operations Advance. Fletcher. I photographed every page of the ledger. Then I photographed the Accounts Receivable folder. Then I went back to Columbus and spread everything across my dining room table and started matching numbers. Over the course of 22 months, there were $94,000 in ledger entries logged as Ops Advance F, with no corresponding invoices, no client payments, no equipment receipts. $94,000. I sent everything to Ms. Okafor. She called me the next morning. "Your brother has been taking money from the business," she said. "These are unauthorized distributions. They would need to come out of his share of the estate." "Does he know about the ledger?" "Probably not," she said. "He probably didn't think you'd go looking." "He hadn't thought I'd go looking because I was the one who had left. I was the one who had chosen a different path. I was the absent co-owner who didn't need it the way he did. He built an entire strategy around the assumption that I was too far away to see clearly. He was wrong. The will reading was scheduled for a Tuesday in March. My father's estate attorney was a man named Mr. Calloway, who had known the family for 20 years and who treated Fletcher with the familiar warmth of someone who had watched him grow up. I had met him exactly twice. I arrived early with Miss Okafor. We sat on one side of the conference table, and I watched Mr. Calloway's eyebrows rise slightly when he saw she was there. Fletcher came in 5 minutes later. He was wearing a fleece vest and work boots, which was either authentic or strategic, and he stopped when he saw me. His eyes moved to Ms. Okafor. Something shifted in his face, very fast, there and then gone. "Who's this?" he asked, pulling out his chair. "My attorney," I said. He laughed. "It came out thin. It's a will reading, Maeve. It's not a deposition." "Sit down, Fletcher," I said, not unkindly, just firmly. He sat. Mr. Calloway cleared his throat and opened the folder. Our mother sat between us, her hands folded in her lap. She had agreed to come after I explained, quietly and without drama, that she needed to hear this in person and not receive a summarized version from Fletcher afterward. The reading was straightforward. The house went to our mother in life estate, with ownership transferring to the estate after her death. The liquid assets, roughly $180,000 in savings and CDs, were split evenly. The business, the equipment, the client contracts, the company vehicles, the name my father had spent 30 years building, was split 50-50, exactly as the 7-year-old document stated. Fletcher drummed his fingers on the table once. "That's it." Mr. Calloway looked at him over his glasses. "That's the document." "Dad intended to update it," Fletcher said. He said it with a kind of practiced casualness, like he was just mentioning something everyone already knew. He told me directly he thought the business split didn't reflect who had actually been running things. Mr. Calloway said nothing. "I have an email," Fletcher said. "From Dad. He says he was planning to restructure." Ms. Okafor spoke for the first time. "Intention without legal action isn't a will," she said pleasantly. "The document before us is the valid instrument. We can all agree on that." Fletcher looked at her. Then he looked at me. "You're seriously going to do this? You're going to take 50% of a business you haven't touched in 10 years. "Dad built that business," I said. "He decided what to do with it." "He decided wrong," Fletcher said. His voice had dropped. It was the voice he used when he was very angry and trying not to show it. "You were never here. Do you know what it took to keep that company running? Do you know how many times I covered payroll out of my own pocket when cash flow was short?" I looked at him. "How much did you cover?" He blinked. "What?" "How much did you personally cover? Because I've been going through the ledger, Fletcher, Dad's handwritten ledger, and I found 22 months of entries logged as operations advances to you. $94,000 with no corresponding invoices." The room went very quiet. My mother turned to look at him. Fletcher's face went through several changes in rapid succession. I watched them happen. Surprise, calculation, something that was almost anger but landed closer to fear. "Those were loans," he said finally. "Dad knew about them. He approved them." "Did he write that anywhere?" Miss Okafor asked. Silence. "Because the ledger entries don't indicate approval," she continued. "They indicate a notation, not a signature, not a countersignature. Just a notation, which in the context of an estate with 2 equal beneficiaries means those funds are unaccounted for." "This is insane," Fletcher said. He pushed back from the table. "You've been gone for 10 years and now you come in here with a lawyer and a highlighter and decide to blow up the family?" "I didn't blow anything up," I said. "I just started paying attention." Mr. Calloway was looking at the table. He looked very tired. "Shall we continue?" he asked. We continued. By the time we left the office that afternoon, the outline of a settlement had been proposed. The $94,000 would be deducted from Fletcher's share of the business valuation before any distribution. Fletcher would have the option to buy out my 50% at a price to be determined by an independent appraiser. If he couldn't secure financing within 90 days, the business would be offered for sale and the proceeds split. Fletcher signed the acknowledgement. He signed it the way people sign things they have no choice but to sign, with the pen pressing too hard into the paper. As we were leaving, he caught up to me in the elevator lobby. He was alone. Miss Okafor was behind me, near enough to hear. "You didn't have to do this publicly," he said. His voice was low and tight. "You could have just called me." I thought about the going-away party, the balloons, the sheet cake, the manila envelope handed to me with a smile in front of everyone I knew. "You chose the setting," I said. "I just showed up prepared." The elevator opened. I stepped in. I didn't look back at his face. I already knew what was on it. My mother called me that evening. She was quiet for a moment after I said hello, the way she always is before she says something she's been holding for a while. "He's been telling me for months," she said, "that if we went to court you would lose, that you weren't entitled to anything because you left." My nephew stood in my mouth. "I didn't know about the money," she said. "The ledger." "I know that too." She was quiet again. Outside my window, the Columbus skyline was doing what it always does at dusk, going amber and then gray. "Your father," she said finally, "left things the way he did on purpose. He was a meticulous man. He could have updated that will any time in 7 years. He chose not to." I hadn't let myself think about that directly until she said it. The password. Maeve Fletcher, 1993. The ledger my father kept in his own hand, updated to the end of last season. The will he had left unchanged despite his son's careful, patient pressure. He had seen it, maybe not all of it, but enough. "I know," I said, for the 3rd time, and this time I was crying. My mother said, "I love you, Maeve." She hadn't said those words to me unprompted in so long I couldn't remember the last time. My nephew stood in my said. Things moved slowly after that, the way legal and financial things always do. The independent appraisal took 6 weeks. The business was valued at just under $1.9 million. Fletcher's buyout option would require roughly $855,000 after the unauthorized distributions were accounted for. He applied for an SBA loan. He was denied the first time. He was still working on it when the 90-day window closed. The business sold to a regional property management company out of Cincinnati in late summer for $1.877 million. I went to the closing by phone. It was a Tuesday. Fletcher was there in person, and I was told he didn't say anything when the papers were signed. With my share, I did a few things. I paid off my mortgage. I set up a small fund in my father's name at the Dayton Community Foundation, directed toward vocational training programs for adults re-entering the workforce. I kept the rest. I didn't feel guilty about keeping it. My father had worked 30 years for it, and he had left it to me, and I had spent 3 months fighting to honor that. My mother kept the house. She joined a garden club in the fall. She texts me pictures of her tomato plants. Last month, she asked me if I wanted to come home for Thanksgiving. Not as an obligation, not framed around what other people needed, just whether I wanted to come. I said yes. Fletcher is still in Dayton. He took a job with a different landscaping company. I heard this through my aunt, not from him. I don't know what his financial situation looks like now, and I have made myself stop trying to calculate it. He is my brother. That is a fact that doesn't change. But it sits differently than it used to, like a piece of furniture you've moved to another room. It's still in the house. You just don't walk into it in the dark anymore. I sit on my back porch sometimes in the evenings, after work, after the neighborhood quiets down. I have a porch because I bought a house. I bought a house because I didn't let someone destabilize me with a manila envelope at a party. I look at the yard, which is small and a little overgrown because I haven't had time to deal with it, And I think about my father rising before dawn every spring morning for 30 years because he believed in building something with your hands. I am my father's daughter. I always was. No email was ever going to change that. The thing I keep coming back to is the password. Maeve Fletcher, 1993. My father typed those two names together every single day for 15 years and never told either of us. That's not an accident. That's a man saying something he didn't know how to say out loud. I think about the choices people make when they believe nobody is watching. Fletcher believed I wasn't watching. He believed that distance meant disinterest. That because I had built a life somewhere else, I had forfeited the right to pay attention. He was wrong about that, but more than that, he was wrong about what attention actually requires. It doesn't require proximity. It requires caring enough to look. What Fletcher did wasn't just dishonest. It was a particular kind of dishonest that depends on the other person's goodness working against them. He handed me that envelope at a party, surrounded by people I loved, because he calculated that I would be too gracious to make a scene. He timed it before a mortgage signing because he thought financial pressure would make me easier to move. He kept my mother away from her own estate meeting because he assumed she would defer to whoever was physically present. Every move he made was built on the assumption that decent people are easier to manipulate than ruthless ones. And for a while, that's true. Decent people hesitate. They give benefit of the doubt. They feel guilty for suspecting. I felt all of that. I sat at my kitchen table the night of that party, and the first thing I felt wasn't anger. It was shame. Like maybe he was right. Like maybe I had abandoned something I had no right to claim. That feeling almost won. What saved me wasn't courage in the dramatic sense. It was something quieter. It was the willingness to sit down, think clearly, and ask the right questions instead of the comfortable ones. Not, did I deserve this? But does this actually add up? Not, should I just let it go? But what would letting it go actually cost? Clear thinking is its own form of integrity. My father understood that. He kept a handwritten ledger for 22 years, not because he didn't trust computers, but because he trusted his own eyes more. I also think about what it took to keep going after I found the ledger, to photograph every page, to call Ms. Okafor, to show up at that conference table and sit across from my brother without raising my voice. That kind of steadiness doesn't come from not feeling things. I was terrified the whole time. It comes from deciding that what you're fighting for is worth the discomfort of fighting for it. My father built something real with 30 years of early mornings and honest labor. Honoring that wasn't optional. What I want to say to anyone sitting with their own version of a manila envelope right now is this. The people who count on your decency to defeat you are making a bet. And the way you beat that bet isn't by becoming ruthless. It's by becoming precise. Be honest. Think clearly. Don't quit. Those three things, working together, are harder to outmaneuver than any amount of scheming. Fletcher had a 10-year head start, and I still found the ledger in an afternoon. My father left his estate the way he did on purpose. He watched both of us for decades, and he made his choice. That's the part that makes me cry when I think about it too long. Not the money, not the house. The fact that he saw me, even when I thought I was invisible to him, even when I had stopped trying to be seen. I am my father's daughter. I always was.